Good afternoon, guys. Oh, it's loud in a small space. Good start, huh? Appreciate you all coming on short notice. Obviously a very difficult day here for the organization and relieving Jeff of his head coaching duties. It's not a decision that you ever want to make, and it's a day you never want to come as a group. But I think collectively we all felt that this was the best chance to move forward, to finish the season with some direction and hope, and to begin the process of building for 2017. I want to thank Jeff for 5 years of unwavering leadership, and we put him in some tough circumstances over the past few years. Never expected a day like this to become, never wanted a day like this to happen, and always wanted to make sure that we could find a way to fight through some of the difficult challenges, and he was absolutely the right person when we hired him in 2012 and the right person to help bring this club back. And for whatever reason this year we didn't have the kind of success over the past few weeks that I think we all expected and wanted. It's unfortunate for him today because this is an organizational failure. And I think when you stand up here, anytime you let a head coach go, we all have to take a look in the mirror. This is not just about the head coach or the coaching staff. We have to improve across the board, from personnel to operations to everything. And it's what we told the staff today, that unfortunately today this is being discussed as Jeff Fisher, but collectively as the Rams, we need to get better moving forward, and that process really begins today. I think one of the things that we'll reflect on over the past few months is really how good Jeff was to the players, to his coaches, how he led them with conviction, how hard they fought for him, and what it meant to him to be the head coach of the Rams. And we'll be forever grateful. This is a tough day for him and his family. I think we can respect that. It's a tough day for everybody in the organization who love coming to work for Jeff. But hopefully we'll find the right path forward. I believe we will. And that challenge begins today. So we'll open it up from here.
Yeah. Kevin, was the performance or lack thereof of your team yesterday the deciding factor in taking this action against Jeff? And also, do you agree with Todd Gurley, who said after the game yesterday that certain members of this team had given up and could hardly wait for the season to be over?
I think that's the question about Todd is a better question for Todd. I think when you look at our team having lost 8 of the past 9, some of the performances the past few weeks have been a little bit more lopsided. I think that's what really tipped it. And I think if you look at our team over the past few years, we had some close losses. Even when you look at the stretch, after the 49ers game, we come back, we win 3 in a row. We had 9 games really from week 2 through week 11 that were decided on the final drive or in the final 2 minutes. The team was competitive and playing well, and some of those breaks went our way and some of those breaks didn't go our way. But I think when you look at the past few games, for whatever reason that got out of reach in the second half, I think that was really the deciding factor. This is solely a performance-related issue. And when you look at the team and where it is and how we get better moving forward, I think for the fans, for the players, for the coaches, for the organization, we wanted to make sure games like yesterday didn't happen again.
Kevin, with a game in 3 days, why the timing now?
It's a great question, Omar. There's never a good time to do this. I think as we looked at it from an organizational perspective, on a short week, we have 3 games left against the NFC West. Seattle, San Francisco, Arizona. We're 2-1 in the division. This is a chance to finish strong in the NFC West, have the chance to have the best record in the NFC West. And you wanted to see the players come out on Thursday with energy. This is a short week, and we really felt that John Foss would be the right person in our organization to go lead this team for the last few weeks. I think the other thing when you look at it with 3 weeks left, this is never a good decision or an easy decision to make no matter what the time, and it's especially harder as you get into making an in-season decision. But the players have put a lot of effort over the past few years and this year into this season, and with them still in the building, you want to give them a chance to talk with them, to debrief, to understand how we move better, to how we can make this a better organization. Again, this is not just about coaching. This is top to bottom, how we can get better. And this is not a coaching staff is 4-9. We're all 4-9. And so I think when we look at that with a chance to finish with energy and to make a difference over the past 3 games. And I don't think going into a game, even because it's a short week, I mean, you look at this week's schedule, we have 2 walkthroughs and then we fly to Seattle. This is one of those where I understand the challenges of the short week, but we've played Seattle before. They're a divisional opponent. You know, we know them. You're not installing a whole new game plan. So really this gives, you know, Coach Fossil a chance to walk in, you know, make his impression on the team in a short time, get them through 2 quick walkthroughs and try to get their energy back ahead of a big, you know, primetime game against Seattle.
Mike Poppins, USA Today. You said before that Fisher was put in a tough position and that it's an organizational failure. So with some obvious holes on the roster, how does this impact less need standing?
You know, I think starting today, we'll have a complete review of the entire organization. And we sat down with Les, and again, this team is not where it needs to be. And we need to own up to that from a coaching perspective, from a personnel perspective, from an administration perspective. I think all of us need to get better. And I think Les will be the first person to tell you that his department can get better as well. And I think we need to analyze that department, the decisions that have been made, collectively, how we improve the roster and see where it goes. I'm sure when we bring in, you know, prospective head coaching candidates, they'll discuss the roster and the changes that need to be made there. You know, today, you know, unfortunately, Coach Fisher was the only decision that we made, but I think collectively we all need to figure out ways, you know, to improve. And I think as the analysis goes on, as we get towards the end of the season and the beginning of the off season, we'll take a look collectively at the football operation and make sure that we make the changes to make this successful. I think it's always, you know, a little bit easy to say that this is just the coach's fault. I think that that's always a mistake. I think you have to look at this and say, you know, the coach is a representation of the entire organization, and we can all be better, and we can all find a way forward. And I would never want to scapegoat Jeff. He's worked too hard. He's been too loyal to all of us to do that. Unfortunately, I would never want today to come across this. This is just a timing thing as you move forward. But to me, this is, as you look at Les, as you look at the entire organization, we need to make sure that, you know, 4-9 doesn't happen again. You know, in the collective run, we need to find a way to get over 500 to get in the playoffs and deliver a Super Bowl trophy back to Los Angeles.
Sir, why should fans get excited when your go-to guy is the special teams coach as opposed to the offensive or the defensive coordinator, which is usually the case? And what do you say to fans that Coach Fossil, all due respect, is going to bring more than just a middle school offense, as Todd Gurley said?
Well, I think it gets back to Omar's question. You get into a 3-day week, you're not going to be able to install a new offense, whether it's this week or in the last 2 weeks. Obviously, I think the systems that we put into place in OTAs and in training camp are the systems that we're going to have for the final 3 weeks. I think there were a couple of factors in choosing Coach Fossil. First, the players love him. They have tremendous energy. They play hard from him. I think if you look at our team, our special teams units have been among the best performing. I think for those of you who watch Hard Knocks, the energy, the excitement the players have for Coach Fossil that he brings is evident. I also think one of the things when you make a change like this is how do you make it as least interruptive as possible. Everybody on the offensive and defensive side can go game plan this week the same way they would. They all have the same responsibilities on game day, you know, that they had. And Coach Fossil is someone who stood up in front of the entire team. I think when you look at the history of special teams coordinators and why they're becoming more popular as head coaching choices or head coaching candidates is they have experience standing in front of everybody in the room. It's not just standing in front of a position group or the offense or the defense, but they have a chance to go talk to everybody on the roster, player 1 through 53. I think Coach Fossil carries tremendous respect from our players. He carries tremendous respect from our coaches. He'll bring tremendous energy. And this is about getting the most out of our group for the last few games. If there was a magical cure that would allow us to win games, to score 40 points a game or to shut people out, I think we would be searching for it today. But this is really about getting the most out of the talent we have, out of the coaches we have, and what we can do over the last 3 weeks to provide some excitement and then go from there. But Coach Fossil is a tremendous coach. I think universally respected by peers and throughout the league, and this is a great platform, you know, for him. And when I chatted with him earlier, I said, you know, take these 3 games as not only an audition for us, but for everybody else in the league, and show, you know, coach this team to the best of your ability. And I think he'll take that challenge to heart, and he'll get the best out of our players.
Kevin, to your right, Kurt Sandoval, ABC7. Obviously, it's a results business. At the same point, there was a story leaked last week that Jeff had just signed an extension. Can you speak to what his reaction was, and from an organizational kind of a follow-up, what your time frame is on a new coach?
Yeah, look, Jeff was obviously disappointed, and I don't want to speak for Jeff here. We had a good conversation this morning. I think he was obviously disappointed. He was looking forward to finishing the season strong and, you know, coming back and having a chance to get this team in a better place. And I think we all shared the optimism from the beginning of this year of where we could be. I think in terms of the extension, you have to go back in time to really when we looked at it, which was moving this team to Los Angeles. I don't think Stan or myself or anybody else in the organization thought it was fair for Jeff or Les to walk into a relocation year as a lame duck coach. And so I think our viewpoint was always that for the staff, for everybody, if you're going to pick up your family and move, that you should have some security that went with it. I think we all wanted Jeff to have tremendous success, and I think when you looked at how we finished last year, we were 3-1 to finish the end of the year. We started this year 3-1. I think we all felt good about the direction, of our football team, but it was the right thing to do to give them the security to go beyond this year, to make the right decisions, to think long term, and to believe that they were going to be part of this moving forward, which is exactly what we all wanted and what we all had hoped, and I think we wanted that success. I think the one thing, as you said, this is a performance-oriented business. Unfortunately, the results weren't there, and I think we always looked at this, and I've said time and time again that you can't just look at this year through the prism of the one-loss record, that there were going to be some challenges that came with the relocation year, and I think that was always our mindset going in. I think when you look at this now, this is somewhat about wins and losses, but this is more about direction and hope and where we feel we're headed. And I think had we finished the year 8-8, 7-9, in that range, I think we all would have understood some of the challenges, that went with that. I think, unfortunately, just where we've been the past few weeks didn't really speak to where we were headed as the franchise, and I think where we wanted to be or where we think, the fans' expectations or our expectations should be. I think the question on the coaching search moving forward, obviously today has been a tough day for everybody in the organization, and I'm sure starting tomorrow we'll begin, to gather as a group and to go through all of this. But I think the most important thing before we start a coaching search is to identify, make sure we get our building right, make sure we get what we need right. And I think the obvious thing people are going to say is, well, you're going to go hire an offensive coach because, you've had a defensive coach or where the offense has been. I think we need to find the best head coach for the Los Angeles Rams. And whether that's an offensive coach, a defensive coach, special teams coach, the interim coach, a college coach, I think we have to be willing to look under every possible avenue to find the right fit to go lead this football team. I think too often when we go through these processes, we look for the opposite of what we had as if that's going to be the fix. I think, quite frankly, we need to make sure we find the right coach to lead these 53 players and to put together a coaching staff and to represent this organization, in the best possible way. And that process will start tomorrow. Obviously, we have a little bit of an advantage now with 3 weeks to go before the end of the season. You can't go talk to anybody in the NFL, and we'll meet with everybody in the building, from the trainers to the equipment room to the football operations staff to the personnel side, to make sure that collectively we all are on the same page about the qualities of what we're looking for in a head coach. Stan, will have some clear viewpoints on where we're headed as well, and set the direction and the tone, and we will find the right leader for this football team, moving forward. But I think the worst thing you can do is set any kind of criteria or timetable for a search. You have to make sure that you go out and find the best head football coach for the Los Angeles Rams.
Hey, Kevin, I just first wanted to quick touch back on something you mentioned earlier, and then a quick follow-up. At this point, can you not ensure that Les Snead will be back next season?
Yeah, I would not say same point on the head coach. I think collectively we need to take a look at this entire organization, and that includes personnel. And I think it would be a mistake right now to say that we're satisfied with where we're at on the personnel side and to ensure Les will be back. And I think Les will be the first person to stand up here and say the same thing. I think he told you guys that on Friday. And, I think the one thing, Jeff was always fantastic about standing up after games and saying, I take full responsibility for the wins and losses in this organization. But I think we all need to do that. And I think Les will take responsibility for the one-loss record. I'll take responsibility for the one-loss record. Jeff obviously did, and hopefully Coach Fossil will moving forward. I think the most important thing, for Les are groups in draft meetings right now. We need to go get that board ready. They need to go carry out their duties, and we begin the, organizational look. I think that'll be the first place we'll start. But I think it would be a mistake to say, that anybody in the building is guaranteed to come back next year, because now you're starting to set criteria, for where we're at.
And you said earlier that this decision was based purely from a performance standpoint, but there's been a lot of negativity surrounding the team lately, whether it's the booing from the home fans to the Eric Dickerson controversy, a lot of people on national TV and stuff clamoring for Jeff Fisher to be fired. How much of that might have played into the decision, especially since you're in Los Angeles, new market, all that stuff?
I think it'll be easy to say that that played into it. I think what that overlooks is the fact that all of that is generated off the one-loss record. And when you look at the fans, when you look at anything that's happened in a few weeks, everybody's been frustrated about losing 8 out of 9 and having some tough losses. And it all comes back down to how you're performing on the field. There were none of these issues when we started the year 3-1 or when we were back in August, hosting the Cowboys. This team has had some really high highs this year and some low lows. But this is purely from a football perspective. Are we headed in the right direction? Do we have the necessary hope, that we need? And I think the answer to that right now is, we're not sure, and we thought it was time to make a change. But this is solely about on-field performance. The rest of it comes and goes with wins and losses, and I think we understand that being in a major market, and we understand that that goes through a season. You're going to have years where you start well, and slide at the end, and people are going to be frustrated. You're going to have years where you start slowly and get on a run. I think you've seen that with a number of teams this year. You take a snapshot of any team through 4 games, 8 games in a season, it looks a lot different than it does towards the end of the season.
Kevin, you're on record as recent as I think 2 weeks ago as saying that that you supported Jeff Fisher and you had to look beyond the win-loss, and now you're saying it is about the performance. What changed with this game or today?
Well, I think absolutely on record. I always will be the first to say we've always been on record about Jeff saying that there is more, than win-loss here. But I think that should never be, construed as the win-loss doesn't matter. I think we always looked at it as there are going to be ups and downs this year, and it was not just about win-loss. And when I said that, we were sitting there at 4-5. Jared goes and plays, and then we had a tough couple of weeks. And I think when you look at this team, it's not just always about win-loss. It's about where we sit. And I think there were comments the same week talking about making sure there was appropriate direction and hope in how we finished the season. And I think when you look at the past few years, last year we were 4-8, and we went on a great run. We won 3 straight games. We played very tough in week 17. You felt a lot different about the team, at the end. But I think when you look at yesterday's performance, the Saints game, the Patriots game, I think there's just been a tough run when you really look through the prism. It's did we feel we were headed in the right direction over the past few weeks? And those things are fluid. Had this just been a team that finished 7-9, 6-10, and had some close calls the way we did at certain points, I think we may have looked at it differently. But I think it was, the way we played the past few weeks that really changed the barometer from that point.
Kevin, in light of the investment that the organization has made in Jared Goff, how important is it to get someone in here that can foster his development and maturation into a productive quarterback in the NFL?
Well, I don't look at this just as Jared Goff. I look at it as an entire offense. We obviously traded for Jared Goff, believe in him, and have seen great flashes over the past few weeks. Todd Gurley, 2015 Rookie of the Year. We've invested significant picks in the offensive line. Expect them to improve. I think we've invested a lot of picks into the offense, and we want to see them all get better. But I think it goes back to the original question. There are lots of ways to improve the offense and support your investment in Jared and Todd and the offensive line and the other positions. But that doesn't necessarily mean hiring an offensive head coach. It can mean hiring the best head coach who brings a great offensive coordinator with them or a great quarterbacks coach with them. And I think as we look at it collectively, wherever we sit, right now, we're just not functioning on offense the way we should. But I don't know that that's just a function of not supporting Jared or the coaches. I think right now we have to collectively look and say we're 32nd on offense. How do we get better? How do we improve? But you may find an unbelievable head coaching candidate who you meet with, you believe is absolutely perfect for the Los Angeles Rams, who has the defensive background. I think what's most important is they have a plan for how you maximize the offense and how you improve the offense. And I think it'll be easy when you talk to some offensive coordinator candidates. Obviously, you're going to understand there, and you have a pretty good defense and how they may view that. I think the harder challenge when you sit down with some defensive-minded candidates is going to be what's your plan, not only for the defensive side of the ball, but for improving the offense. And I think one of the things you look at historically, if you look at top offenses right now, a lot of them are not being called, the head coach is not the play caller. So I think there are great ways to build a franchise, utilizing all of your coaches. And I think that's really where our focus has to be. It's getting the right head coach. The investment in Jared's important, but so is our investment in the defensive line, the linebackers, the defensive backs, and every member of this team.
Is that a priority?
I think improving our record's a priority. I think if you look at, Denver last year, for better or worse, was 31st in offense and won the Super Bowl title. So I think if you look at us, we were 3-1 and playing close games. What's a priority is winning football games. What's a priority is making sure that we put our best foot forward. And I think it's easy to say, this is Los Angeles, you want to be entertaining, you want to be Showtime, you want to fix the offense. You want to do all of that. But what's most important to our fans and our organization is wins and losses, and we need to make sure we get that right and find a person whose sole job is to make sure we win more games than we lose.
Yeah, Kevin, how much trust have you lost with the LA fan, and how quickly can that be regained? Is it as simple as wins and losses?
Bill, you and I have had this conversation, during the year. We'll find out. And I don't think this move is designed, to appease the fans in a short moment. I think this move is looking, at a period of time over 5 years that we think, as an organization, we need to move better. Obviously, the higher we make and the direction we take as a football team is going to go a long way to saying, whether we got this right or not. It's easy to stand up here and say you're going to make a change. The hard part is getting the change right. And I don't want to, have this be a tough day for the organization, just to say we're trying to win the fans' trust back. We obviously want to win the fans' trust back, but changing coaches doesn't win the fans' trust back. Winning games and building a great organization is what brings your fans back. And I think that's a long-term commitment, and everything we've done, Stan's vision for what we're trying to build here in Los Angeles is a long-term vision. We have a terrific stadium going up, a terrific project, bold move to get here and to be part of this franchise. We want to be here for the long term, and we want to get it right. And I think if you only play this in the short term, you're probably making a mistake. And for us, this is not about knee-jerk reactions. This is about getting this right and having the opportunity to prove to our fans that we prioritize winning above all else. And I think when you look at this decision, I think that's the message that we have to send. But that's the message today. But the only way fans will believe that message is if we get it right moving forward. And that's where we need to make sure we get it right.
Would you prefer to have a decision on Les Snead in the front office before you hire a head coach?
I think as we take a look at the organization over the next few weeks, you'll start to get an idea of where you think you're headed, with the personnel staff. When we had the opening in 2012, we hired the head coach before the general manager. We had a great selection of general manager candidates, and that worked. This time, if you decide to make a move at general manager, you may choose a general manager first and a head coaching candidate second. I think it all depends on, as you go through the process over the next few weeks, the head coaching candidates you identify, the potential, if you decide to make a change at general manager, the general manager candidates you identify, and what you think the right order is. I think you can win lots of games under either formula. I think if you look, there are great examples of coaches who have been paired with GMs and had success, and GMs who hired coaches who had success. I think one of both the good parts and the bad parts of going through this process in the NFL is there is no proven way to get it done. You can hire first-time head coaches, you can hire college coaches, you can hire coaches who have been fired before, and they all have, you can point to any examples of ones who have had great success or ones who have struggled. I think what's most important is finding the right fit for this organization. And if you're going to, if we decide that we're going to move forward with the personnel department, you have to make sure that you have a head coach and GM pairing that can work and they're on the same page. I think you'll find out, as I said, a lot about our team and the way people view our organization when you go through the head coaching search and how people view our personnel. I think we have always felt collectively that we're pretty close as a football team. We haven't gotten over the hump the past few years. We have to find a way to do that. Maybe we're not as close as we think we are, and that's what this next few weeks are designed to tackle. And maybe we are close, and the candidates will reflect that. But I think what's important is when we come back and we present, our football leadership overall, that people believe that we're headed in the right direction and we've made the right choices.
And after having a veteran coach in Jeff Fisher, do you think there could be a proclivity to find a young mind that you can groom and grow with?
Well, I think that's what goes back to what we said. We have a tendency to hire the opposite of what we had. I think we sometimes get cause and effect backwards. For whatever reason, we're not performing as an organization. I don't think that's because we hired a veteran-minded defensive head coach. I think that that's a mistake to look at it that way. I think whatever shortcomings we have as an organization are because of our shortcomings as an organization, not because we hired a defensive-minded head coach. I think the knee-jerk reaction is to say, oh, we're going to go hire a young offensive-minded, first-time head coach. I don't know that pendulum swing is necessary. I think what we need to do is find the right person, for this organization, a person, who believes in Stan's vision, who has the tools and resources to help us win, and someone we can build long-term around. I think that's where we have to get it right.
Kevin, what are some of the things that you're looking to see in these final 3 weeks that would kind of give you that optimism heading into the offseason?
Well, I think it starts, if you go back to Darren's question, you want to see Jared's continued progression. Obviously, Jared's had some really good flashes and some tough moments over the past few weeks. And so I think you want to see Jared continue to progress. I think you want to see the players play hard and play with energy. For whatever reason, I think we were a little bit flat the past few weeks, and whether that's just a long season wearing on them. And I think, to go back to Liz's question, I think you can sit there and say this year has taken its toll, whether it's the air travel miles or moving facilities or all those things. Can you get a bounce back step? Can we go play? But I also think it's our chance. The past losing 8 of 9 is tough, but they've all been, that stretch has been out of division. And so I think what you want to look at over the next 3 weeks is how do we line up within our own division? We've fared pretty well against the Seahawks recently. Can we continue to do that? We had a tough outing against the 49ers week 1. Have we improved since week 1 to this point when we face them at home again? Obviously, we had a tough, hard-fought win over Arizona, earlier this year. Where do we stand against them week 17? I think, look, the closest path to making the playoffs is winning your division. And you only have to be better than 3 teams. And how we stack up against those teams, I think we want to see, from that perspective. If you can go evaluate, if we play with, the energy and passion I think Coach Fossil will bring, from that standpoint, we can try to evaluate our talent and see where we stack up and get to a more honest assessment. But I don't think you want to say, hey, we'd obviously all love to win the last 3. And if not that, then 2-1, then 1-2. But I think we want to see, can we evaluate, this group, the young players, and really build some momentum into the offseason.
Kevin, I know you said the search for a head coach begins in earnest tomorrow, but do you have maybe a short list already with which to start, or are you going to hire one of these coaching search committees, firms?
Yeah, this has not been something we've been laying at night around thinking about for the past few weeks. So obviously, we're going to get together as an organization. Stan and I talked last night. We started talking this morning, again, about the criteria that he wants for the next leader. And then you meet with the building and establish that criteria. And then I think you start to evaluate the potential candidates against that. And you try to find where you're going to go. I'm sure that we'll get a number of inbound calls over the next few weeks about people who are interested. This is going to be a very attractive opening. I mean, when you look at an opportunity to play for a really good owner in a great market and what will be a world-class stadium, with a young QB and back-to-back defensive rookie and offensive rookies of the year, and Aaron Donald and Todd Gurley, there is talent on this roster. This will be an attractive job. But I think what's most important is not coming up with just the set of criteria, but being flexible and being open-minded. For better or for worse, that's what having the next few weeks gives you the chance to do. And when you get to the end of the season, you start to submit the permission forms, for the coordinator candidates or the other candidates throughout the NFL, that you're going to be prepared and hopefully that you can have a plan for how that first week goes. And we've studied the history of hiring dates, when people get hired. And when you look at the tranches, usually there's a wave that goes January 10th through 12th, and then the dominoes, start to fall. You'd love to be in the January 10th through 12th group, so that you can start to build a staff. But there are going to be other considerations. You may find a candidate who's headed to the Super Bowl, and you may need to wait, until later in the year. I think you have to be open-minded as you go and you look into this process. We need to find the right fit to the Los Angeles Rams, and that starts with identifying our own shortcomings and who we think can fill those, not just looking at who's had success and then trying to apply that to our team.
In talking to Stan last night, was a decision made last night, or was that something that was made this morning?
I think we talked about it at length last night. These are never the kinds of decisions you want to make easier, and I think he really wanted to sleep on it and discuss it again this morning, and so we chatted again this morning. And I think you have to look at how hard this is. Jeff Fisher has meant a lot to this organization, still does. And he took us from a period in St. Louis where instability through a number of first-time head coaches and through some ups and downs. And while we didn't get to where we needed to be, he provided stability and credibility, to the organization. And he brought in, an excellent coaching staff. Players wanted to play for him. This was a team that perpetually was on the cusp. And Jeff's been through a lot. We put him in a difficult situation. When he gets hired, a week before stadium arbitration essentially begins. When you go through that process, you go through those years in St. Louis, then you come through the transition here. And this was, I said, a day you never wanted to have happen. And you wanted to see him succeed. It's why you wanted to give him the security of the new contract so he could go operate this year, not feeling as if he was walking a tightrope. And these are not decisions that you can take lightly. And I think you never want to be emotional after a game and make that decision. I think that's why it was important to discuss it last night, to sleep on it, to reconvene this morning and have the discussion. But I think at the end of the day, we felt this was the right direction, for our football team, which is why we made the ultimate decision we did this morning. But I think as you move forward, this isn't just about today. This is about starting, a quest to bring a Lombardi to Los Angeles. And if you don't if you don't struggle with these decisions, then you don't understand the lives that are impacted throughout the organization.
And just quickly, what was Stan's reaction to seeing a near empty stadium, before the fourth quarter even began? I know you mentioned a lot of the negativity is just associated with the wins and losses, but more than the scores themselves, just that image playing out on national TV.
Well, I think you hate to see that under any circumstance. And I think we all feel frustrations. We're all fans, and we all carry that, and you want to see the crowd excited. And I think when you juxtapose the fourth quarter of yesterday with what you saw against Dallas and Seattle, that was really a hard juxtaposition. And I think it gets back to Bill's question about making sure that we maintain momentum in this market. And this is a decision I think you have to make in any market, but especially as you get into a new market. And I think Stan's a competitor. You never want to see a game end the way yesterday did. And whether the fans had stayed throughout the fourth quarter or not didn't change that we need to be better. And yesterday was not our organization's best foot forward, and we have to find a way to do that.
Just curious if you've had the chance to speak with any of the players and what their reaction might be.
I had a chance to talk to the team briefly. I think the way we looked at today, what was most important was that Jeff had the ability to address the coaches and the players before the news broke of this decision. I'm glad he had the chance to do that and be able to inform them. After that, I met with the players quickly, asked them for their best efforts over the next 3 weeks and to support Coach Fossil in any way that they can. I had a chance to talk to a couple of players briefly. This is hard for them. They love Coach Fisher, and rightfully so. I think one of the things when you looked at this team, the hallmark, this team has always played hard for Jeff Fisher. And so I think this is a tough day for them. And some of these players, whether they've been with us for 5 years, for 2012, some who have been with Jeff dating back before, the Rams, and even those who have come, this year and rookies and have come to love and appreciate everything he is. This is a hard day, and I think it's also a hard day when you're a player. I think we all look in the mirror and realize we're culpable for today's events, and I think that's part of what the players have to realize as well. And it's hard with 3 weeks left, but we ask them for their best efforts, and I think there's an element of them that they want to go out and make sure that they present themselves. We have our national primetime game on Thursday against Seattle. That's always been a place that's gotten our players up to play. Then we have 2 home games, and I think they want to go out on the best possible foot forward and be professionals. But we're a young team, and I think as they develop, this is going to be a maturation day for them, and hopefully this will spark an improved performance over the next 3 weeks.
So I believe you said you didn't want to put a timeline on the hiring process, but you also said you have studied the history of hiring dates. So based on your study, what is realistically the timeline that you are looking at, the hiring date that is best suited for the Rams?
Well, I think the hiring date, the timeline is finding the best possible coach. And I think when you look at that, just like there's no perfect formula, I think when you look at the numbers on coaching studies, that no one bucket seemingly outperforms another bucket. None of the timeline hires seemingly outperform the other. I think if you look, the team we played yesterday with Dan Quinn, who's done a nice job in Atlanta, the Falcons waited until after he was done with the Super Bowl, in Seattle to go hire him. So I think you can find, great coaches at any different time. If you want to wait for someone who's playing in the Super Bowl and you think that's what's best for your organization, then we'll do that. If we find someone, in the first interview who we absolutely believe is the right candidate, for the Los Angeles Rams, I think we'll do that. Again, I think the biggest mistake we can make is, narrowing our search before it even starts. And I think the timeline, gives you a glimpse historically of when coaches have been hired. And usually it starts right around January 10th through 12th. You get the rebound, maybe some of the, I shouldn't say the rebound candidates, that's not fair because there have been a lot of good candidates who have been hired there, but kind of that next wave, usually there's that first domino that falls in the coaching cycle. And then from there, you typically see January 15th, 16th, then you see some, a coach, maybe the coaches in the first 2 rounds gets an interview process, late January. But what's most important is being able to build a staff, being able to develop a working relationship with the personnel department, and obviously going through the entire viewpoint of how you get this correct. But this is not about getting the coaching hire right in January. This is December 12th next year and of the following year saying we got this coaching hire right for our organization and for the fans. And I think that's where our focus is going to be.
Kevin, you talked about the barometer had changed over the past 3 or 4 weeks and how difficult this is for the players. Is it fair to say that some of these players, were you guys concerned that they quit on him the way the last 3 or 4 weeks, especially yesterday, unfolded?
No, I don't. I think one of the hallmarks of a Jeff Fisher team is the team has never quit on Coach Fisher. And I think when you can look back over the history of our teams, we've had some tough stretches in 2012 through this year. We've had some series where we've won a few in a row, we've lost a few in a row. Our players never quit on Jeff. I do not believe that at all, and I think that would be unfair. For whatever reason, we didn't perform up to our capabilities the past few weeks. And I think, as I said, maybe it's the long year. Maybe there's been the travel. We had 2 road games back-to-back, Midwest, East Coast, coming home. For whatever reason, we weren't at our best, but I think it would be very unfair to say this team quit on Jeff Fisher. And I think these players are tremendous professionals. They played hard for our coach. The fact that we may not have played at our best, may be an indication of other factors, but I don't believe this team quit.
Kevin, how do you feel like Jeff Fisher took the news, and did you get the impression that this kind of took him by surprise?
Again, I think Jeff's the best person to describe his emotions in going through how he took the news. He was professional. He handled it well. I don't think any coach ever wants to hear this news. And I think, our goal was always that Jeff would be our head coach here for a very long time. I can't tell you whether he took it by surprise or not. I don't want to speculate on how he took it. We had a good conversation. It was short. I don't think he was certainly expecting it, but I think what's most important is that we had a conversation that will stay between us, and we'll move forward from there.
And back to Stan Kroenke. When he's at the game and he sees what happens on the field yesterday, does he voice concern to you about how that type of loss and the last 8 out of 9 losses will affect the development down in Inglewood?
No, I think we look at this again through the prism of wins and losses. And when we, the project at Hollywood Park is going to be an unbelievable project, and people are excited about it. The football team needs to improve. I think collectively as an organization, our discussions were about how that happens. And I know, Stan's background, his expertise will make Hollywood Park and this stadium, an unbelievable project. It's the reason the other owners put faith in him to move forward and do that. I think what's most important, our fans don't want to sit here and talk just about the project. They want to see the progress on the field. So I think when you're in the heat of the game, you're looking at making sure that we play better. And I think that's where our focus has to be right now, is making sure we improve. I have no doubt that the project will be a success. But I think the one thing you never want to take for granted, that the expertise in a great project can overcome people's disappointment in the football team. And right now it's easy to conflate the two, but we have to tackle them separately. We have to make sure we deliver the best possible project for Los Angeles and the city and for the NFL at Hollywood Park, and we have to make sure that we deliver the best possible football team for our fans and the organization. And ultimately they'll come together. But we want this team to be playing well, not just in 2019, not just as we go sell the building. We want to make sure we go play well against Seattle, San Francisco, and Arizona, and this is the first step towards that.
But a winning product on that field will certainly help in the marketing of that stadium, and Stan probably knows that. Is that part of the conversation?
I think it always comes down to the point is the best marketing is winning. I think we can all say that. And you're naive to think if that doesn't play a factor in this. I think, and again, there has been tremendous warmth in the reception back from the community. I think when you looked at, 82,000 tickets sold yesterday, people are going to put up with ups and downs. So they want to make sure is that we're committed to winning, we're committed to getting it right. I think they'll handle the good days with the bad days as long as they see the passion from ownership that wins and losses elicit, and I think you see that and feel that from Stan today.
Kevin, going back to when Les and Jeff signed those extensions, is there a reason why the organization didn't publicly acknowledge or announce those extensions?
Yeah, I think when you get into it, Lindsay, it ultimately came down to, both Jeff and Les understood all that went into moving this franchise this year from January into March into April into the summer. And both were selfless enough that they wanted to put others first. They wanted to get the team set up in Oxnard. They wanted to get us set up at training camp. They want to make sure this building was up and running. And so I think that they were patient and they didn't want to push their issues. We were able to kind of flesh out some of the remaining issues and get it done towards the summer, but these things take a while to get papered and detailed and get approved by the league office. And so I think when you go through that and then it got into the season, we didn't want the contracts to be a distraction. And maybe that was a mistake on my part, and I can certainly sit here and say that. But the goal was always that they understood that they had our full support. When you get into the season, I don't think organizations typically should be announcing contract extensions in season. I think it's just a distraction. If unfortunately it became a distraction the other way, then the organization has to accept that for where it became. But I think what was most important, I think Jeff always said this, and Les as well, they always knew, Stan had the confidence in both of them. And the sentiment was, we wanted them to know how much we supported them in this move, and we want to make sure we took care of them and we wanted to get it right. And I think they knew that. Unfortunately, it dragged on longer than it did. I don't think that ever played into the decision of where we sit today. But I think it was an understanding that, they always knew that they would have Stan's support throughout this year and throughout the challenges of the season.
Kevin, you mentioned that Jeff was caught by surprise when you told him this morning. Did he try in any way to ask you or convince you to let this happen at the end of the season and let him finish out the regular season?
Yeah, I said we'd leave our conversation to ourselves. His concern was not about him. It was about his coaches and his players, and we really moved forward on that. And I think that's where we should leave the conversation.
Chargers coming?
I think Gardner said this is it. Thanks, guys.